My name is Lyla Harrod. I use she, her pronouns. My trail name is Sugar, so a lot of people call me that. I am from the Northeast United States. I currently live in New Hampshire, up in North Woodstock, New Hampshire, which is right along the Appalachian Trail. And yeah, so I'm based here. All my friends are here. I work with kids and I do some bartending and other odd jobs.
Awesome. Did you grow up in New Hampshire? Did you grow up close to the Appalachian Trail?
So I grew up in Massachusetts, like a little bit north of Boston, in the North Shore, and I was not near the Appalachian Trail. Well, I was 3 hours away. So if that's close to you, then yeah. But I didn't really spend any time on the Appalachian Trail until I was an adult. I mean, I grew up a sporty kid. I played plenty of sports, but they're mostly like team sports and stuff. I didn't have a big hiking family. I didn't get into hiking until my like early 20s. I moved out to the West Coast, out to Seattle, and had a friend out there who took me under his wing and took me out hiking in the Northern Cascades and in the Olympics a lot. And he sort of showed me the ropes, helped me figure out the gear, learn how to do bear hangs, all those little like technical skills that you pick up along the way as a backpacker. So I got those out on the West Coast. And then in my mid 20s, I moved back to the East Coast, the Boston area, a small city called Salem. And yeah, from there, I was hiking a lot in New Hampshire, up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and sort of honing some backpacking skills until I got sober when I was 30 years old. I'm 38 now. I've been sober for a little bit over 8 years, and basically at that point, it sort of changed my life, right? I had spent so much of my 20s hanging out in bars and spending all of my money on, alcohol and stuff like that. So, when you get sober, all of a sudden you have a lot more sort of like time and capacity. So I started hiking a lot. That was a big coping strategy for me, was just to be outdoors. And I didn't have to be out climbing a mountain. I was happy in my local woods and, just sort of like exploring local trails in the area. And yeah, throughout that whole process too, after, about like 9 months of sobriety, I started my gender transition. I'm a trans woman. And so like basically like I knew that I was trans in my like by the like late 20s, I would say, but I didn't really have the capacity to do anything about it as far as like actually living that truth or, living authentically because of my like substance use issues. But once I did get sober, it sort of opened up a lot of doors for me. And, all of a sudden I did have like the confidence and my mental health was doing a bit better. So I was able to like begin my transition, a little bit more publicly and living it. So yeah, pretty much after I began that transition, I it was about 2 years after I got sober. I was at a place where I felt my sobriety was a bit more stable. My gender transition was at a place that I was happy with. And I decided to leave my job. I'd been at a job that I loved, working as the director of a community organization for 6 years. And I left that job to go and hike the Appalachian Trail. And yeah, so I like sold all my things, sold my car, literally like put a couple boxes in a friend's basement and, started living out of a backpack. And I started hiking the Appalachian Trail in late March of 2021, and I loved it. I loved it. I was maybe like 6 weeks into my hike, and I remember having this moment on trail that I just sort of realized, like, this is for me, like it was speaking to me on a really, really deep level as something that I like needed to chase after. Like I felt so deeply passionate about it. And yeah, from there, like I have ended up spending the next, going on, it's 5 years now, making that my priority, making long distance hiking a priority. So that means that I spend between 3 and 8 months out of every year on trail when I can, doing various projects. And I come back and work seasonally in mountain towns or other places, especially up here in New Hampshire. And yeah, and then, I've just been like supplementing that with like projects and working with outdoor companies where I can to kind of just make ends meet. But Yeah, I kind of just tell people I'm a professional dirtbag. Like I have one very specific thing that is very, very dear and important to me, and I'm willing to sort of like channel all of my energy and resources into that. And it's allowed me to do some things that make me really happy and that I'm really proud of. So yeah, I think that's sort of how I got here today.
Thinking back to the Appalachian Trail, before taking on like your first big through hike, did you have any sort of fears and concerns that you needed to manage? And if so, how did you manage them?
Yeah, absolutely. I gotta say, I did feel pretty confident about the backpacking aspect of it. I had never done like multi-week, trips before, but I had gone out for about a week. I had done the Massachusetts section of the Appalachian Trail in 4 days in the year 2020. So I knew I was a strong hiker. I knew the trail itself wasn't going to be too difficult for me, that I'd be able to handle it. But yeah, a lot of my concerns were about being a trans person on trail, specifically being a trans woman on trail, and what that experience would be like and what's, sort of unique challenges I would face. So, in my research leading up to the through hike, I would Google things like, transgender experiences on the Appalachian Trail, trans folks Appalachian Trail, like any different like search combination you can imagine. I was punching into Google, and I really wasn't actually getting any results, which felt wild to me because this, we're talking like probably January 2021, right? Which is just really not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. And to get no results in Google for something like that kind of blew my mind and gave me pause. I was like, wow, it's hard for me to imagine that no trans folks have ever done this before. But it's clear that, those stories just weren't being told for any number of reasons. You know, Not least of all is which, like fear of consequences because of how dangerous it is to be a openly trans person, especially a trans woman, in today's culture. So yeah, I did a lot of Googling around that. And, I decided when I wasn't getting those like results in Google, I was like, okay, well, I don't know the answers and I'm feeling a bit alone, but I really don't want anyone else to feel like this. I knew that I was going to push through and still do that hike, but I didn't want others to have to feel the same way. So I'm somebody who has never really put myself out there publicly. I didn't really have any social media or any social media presence, and wasn't doing any public writing. But at that point, I decided to write for like an outdoor website called The Trek. I blogged my first hike for them, and I started like posting like pictures of myself being in the outdoors, right? Because like literally just seeing trans people in the outdoors was something that I was not like it wasn't an experience that I had had. So I decided, I'm going to sort of get over this reservation that I have about speaking publicly and about posting pictures of myself online and telling my like authentic story. And yeah, just so that no one else had to sort of feel alone. And now I try to be somebody that any queer or trans folks can reach out to, like if they're wanting to get more involved in the outdoors or if they have their own fears and concerns. I want to be a person that's accessible so that nobody ever needs to feel alone when prepping for, like a big adventure in the outdoors.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And thank you for sharing your story. How did you find it documenting and blogging and putting yourself out there while actually on the hike as well? Was that like quite therapeutic for you, or did you feel as though it added, maybe more pressure to maybe have a good time on the trail?
You know, I didn't hold myself to any especially high standard as far as, like, the amount of, like, writing I had to do. I posted pretty regularly on, like, Instagram and stuff. I only really published a few blog posts. I would say the, like, additional pressure that I felt was, like, in feeling like I was representing the trans community in the outdoors. Like, before I'd even started, I wrote a piece called Trans Competence on Trail, which was trying to give people some like tips and tricks of how to be respectful to queer and trans folks when you meet them in the outdoors. And because people had asked, right? Like, a lot of people like are super well intentioned, but maybe just don't have the tools and want to learn how to be respectful and have those conversations and to learn and grow with people. So I'd written that piece, and basically anytime I wrote something like that, or if I mentioned that I am trans, like on a web, like for like the track, or if I was blogging about that, there was always going to be transphobic comments and people sort of like trying to invalidate my identity and basically scare me away from like being in the outdoors. So that was like the pressure that I felt, but I got to say like the overwhelming like takeaway from all that though was incredibly positive. I had so many people, not just queer and trans folks, but allies, people, or even people who have never even met or spoken to a trans person before, who were super supportive, reached out, asked questions, like, and then meeting them on trail as well. I generally have found that people in the trail community, even if they don't have that experience, a lot of them are willing, when you are in person with them, when you meet another person face to face, that it's a lot more possible to see each other's humanity, and that allows you to connect, and it allows differences in opinion to sort of melt away in those moments, and I think a lot of growth can happen in that space.
Yeah. When you look back on the Appalachian Trail, what are some of your like magical moments that, those experiences that really stand out for you that brings you joy and happiness?
Like the first like week or so, I was moving like relatively quickly compared to an average hiker on the Appalachian Trail those first few days, because I'd done a lot of training in advance of the starting my hike. And I was sort of like a loner, but then I remember by the time I got to Franklin, I had like run into this group of folks who I really connected with, and clearly like saw me and like for who I was, and like respected my identity, and we just like got along so well, had so much fun. And I just remember having this sort of like big like get together where we got a like a kiddie pool from the dollar store nearby and filled it up outside this cheap hotel, and we're all just sort of like laying around in a kiddie pool in a ratty parking lot in Franklin, North Carolina. And yeah, just sort of being like, okay, this is what this community is. This is something I can feel really comfortable in and sink into and sort of be myself in fully. So that was a really magical moment. But there's also, I mean, like beyond the social, which is such a big part of the Appalachian Trail, just like the trail itself. Yeah, like going through, like I had never really like hiked through a lot of the South, including the Smokies and Virginia. So like going to places, really any of like the Roan Highlands, any of the Highlands areas were kind of new for me. These like huge open grassy mountains were really magical. And yeah, I don't know. I just think obviously getting up to the White Mountains was a big deal for me too. Again, that's where I live now. I live in New Hampshire in the White Mountains. I remember going through North Woodstock, where I live now, and I stopped at this hostel called the Notch Hostel. I had stopped there because the owner of the hostel, her name's Serena, she had messaged me on Instagram and said that she had been following my hike, and that she like would love if I would come by the hostel, and that she'd love to support me. And, she like gave me a free night to stay there. And that was really like important for me because it was the first of the hostels, which, although many of them were like friendly and like open, and I didn't feel like especially weird about being there, that was the first time that I felt super like welcome. You know what I mean? Like it was more
Yeah.
than just it was like we embrace people from the LGBTQ community here. We are not just tolerating you. So like having that experience with the hostel like that, you know, that is what ended up bringing me back there after my hike. And I started doing work for stays at the hostel. And then I started coming up during the winters in between my through hikes. And eventually I moved up here, and where I'm sitting right now with my one of my best friends. Her name's Trisha. She's the general manager of the hostel. And I'm like a quarter mile away from the hostel right now. So a lot of, really did that hostel stay changed my life.
It's like things have just like come full circle. I love that. And you have to share, how did you get your trail name Sugar?
Well, it's I wish I could say it's like something really cute, but it's basically just that I eat like crap on trail. Honestly, I say on trail. It's truly a lifestyle for me. I think I do think it has to go back to like me like getting sober and everything, because I wasn't much of a sweets person when I was like drinking and using drugs and stuff. But once I got sober, I think it's just kind of serving a need for me, filling a need. So you'll always see me with like a pack of sour gummy worms or something sugary not far from my reach. So it's, yeah, both a dirty trail lifestyle habit and just that is just sort of what I'm about in the core of my being.
Yeah. Do you finish like a big through hike? Do you suffer with like burnout or sort of adventure blues or especially when you're hiking so much, obviously it is something that you love and that you enjoy, but too much of a good thing can sometimes I don't know, like it can just be sort of a bit overwhelming or tired or maybe get to that place where actually you don't appreciate it anymore. Have you ever had to deal with anything like that?
Mm. Well, I can certainly say that post-trail depression is something that I experience every single time after a big adventure of mine. That's something that I account for and plan for, and like my support networks and everything know that about me, and they're very good at supporting me. And I have my own sort of like mental health habits and therapy and everything. So I keep all that going throughout, my adventures. And so that's something that I plan for is knowing that the first couple months when I get back are going to be hard. Just that sort of come down and crash from the constant sort of like dopamine and excitement of all these big new things and being, so connected to the outdoors and then coming back and like, now you got to get a job again, right? Like you're back to the grind. And yeah, it can be a big drop off. And then as far as, like, adventure burnout, my friends sort of joke with me because, like, the first right when I get back from something like, right after I after I did the AT this year, I was just like, "Oh, man, I am not gonna hike, like, for a while. I need to, like, take a break." And my friends are all sort of, like, rolling their eyes, and they're like, "I mean, you say that now, but in, like, 2 weeks, you're gonna be back," like, I have a pretty short sort of, like, recharging period, I would say, because, like, for me, those, like, adventures and everything and, like, hiking and being in the outdoors aren't, like, something I just do as, like, a sport or something like that augments my life. Like, it is a core part of who I am, and if I'm not in the outdoors, it doesn't matter what I'm doing in the outdoors, but if I'm not spending time in the outdoors, I'm not as happy, and, like, it's harder to regulate myself. Like, all these things, like, relate to mental health and just existing as a human being, for me, really do hinge on spending quality time with nature.
Yeah. You mentioned sort of like your mental health habits, and these are things that that you do while on trail and off trail. Would you be able to share a little bit more about what you found that really works for you?
Yeah, I mean, therapy for sure is one of them. Like I mentioned, I'm sober. I'm in a recovery program, so I have like a rich community of people in town and sort of friends around the country that I can place calls to and check in with. You know, and if I'm calling someone who's, like, in the program or also sober like me, it's not necessarily every time that I'm like, "Oh, I'm really, like, wanting a drink or really thinking about drinking," right? But it helps to have people that understand where you're coming from in that way because it is such, like, a shared experience and, like, addiction does have so many, like, you know, people who experience addiction, there's a lot of overlapping themes between us. So it's something that you can sort of like share with somebody else, and it helps to feel understood and to have somebody not necessarily like be worried about a certain feeling or something like that. It's more just like they can like sit with you as like in that place that you're at. So yeah, having like a rich recovery community is important to me. And then just, like, having friends, like, if I'm stressed out on trail, like, I will absolutely send, like, a 5-minute voice message to a friend at home, and just sort of, like, dump everything that I'm feeling to them, and I'll know that they'll sort of hold that with me, and, yeah, it's just, like, a way of sharing myself and allowing myself to feel held by my community in situations in which I could feel really isolated, right? Like, doing the Appalachian Trail this year, like I was doing that self-supported FKT. So that means that like I wasn't hiking with really anybody else. I couldn't get support from anyone else directly. So I spent so much time alone, the vast, vast, vast majority of those 52 days this past summer. So, yeah, like, it's important to not just fully remain isolated. Like, feeling connected to nature is a big part of that, but it's also important to have, your people back home who are checking in on you and, your sort of, like, heart people that you can connect with and, feel seen and loved even when you're far away.
Let's talk about your self-supported FKT. Massive congratulations. 52 days is ridiculous. Like I did when I did the trail, I did it in 100 days and like physically like I mean obviously it's never a comparison, but like the thought of for me of having to do double the distance I don't know honestly how that is even
Right.
possible. I just wanna go back to you know, on that trail, going on the Appalachian Trail, there's a lot of elevation for those who haven't been, there's a lot of elevation gain and loss. You're pushing yourself. You are out there, you know, you've got this amazing community around you, but you are out there by yourself. And as much as it's a physical challenge, it's also that like mental challenge. And I suppose take us back to the FKT, you know, that day after day, you know, what was it like being on trail? Like what got you out of your sleeping bag in the morning? You know, what time were you having to get up? You know, what did that look like?
I think that in the beginning of like a massive project like that so much planning went into, it helped me to remember that this entire project, like me on day one of the trail, that was not day one of that project for me. Day one of that project for me started almost a year prior to that when I made the decision to do it and to like dedicate my time and energy to that. So this isn't something that I just pick up and decided to do. So me sort of like giving up on day one or not getting out of my bag or giving it my absolute best after I'd given it my absolute best the whole year prior to that to get to that point, it wasn't an option for me, you know? So the first like couple of weeks, so I was going southbound, starting in Maine, going through New Hampshire into Vermont. That's sort of the crux of the Appalachian Trail. That's where you get a huge portion of the elevation change and loss, and the terrain is way more rugged than what you see in the rest of the trail. So that is sort of like, yeah, that is the most important part of the trail is making it through that portion. In my case, you know, I had trained so much. A lot of the training I had done was in the White Mountains, so right on that trail, like the hardest part of the trail. So getting up every day was just sort of like what I had been doing anyway. Like those are my home mountains. That feels very comfy to me. I wasn't dreading that. I love hiking. I love being in the outdoors. I love moving my body. So like even though this, you know, this effort was such a huge, you know, like challenging and hard thing, I also love it. It's fun for me. I honestly wouldn't do it if it wasn't fun for me on some level. That doesn't mean, you know, type 2 fun or even type 3 fun isn't involved occasionally, but what gets me out of my bag is that I'm stoked to hike that day, even if I'm sore and even if it's wet out. I do like being out there, and I love the Appalachian Trail. I love the Appalachian Mountains. So I'd say once I got through those first 3 states there, that really, really challenging part, it became something else for me because it was no longer about sort of like physically surviving those initial states and that initial like intense physical challenge. It now became about pushing yourself for mileage. And then I started sort of like thinking about mileage and the numbers a little bit differently, where I was sort of pushing myself more rather than just sort of like surviving and enjoying the mountains. It became like, I'm going to race and I'm going to see, you know, how much I can push my body. Can I push myself to the brink? And in a way that feels okay to me.
I really like the distinction you actually made then when you were explaining it, which actually sort of gave me a little clarity shift. So we talked about, you know, day one out on the trail, but from what you said, you know, this is something that you had been doing planning for almost a year prior. So actually, this is such a massive commitment and undertaking, and it's so true. And sometimes it's almost, I think people can almost forget that just you know, even getting to the start line is such an accomplishment. But take us back to that, I suppose, that year of planning and logistics. You know, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I had made the choice to do the Appalachian Trail self-supported FKT when I was nearing the end of the project that I was doing the year prior, which was hiking the route that I created, the Divide to Crest route, which is a 3,000-mile route from the southern terminus of the Continental Divide Trail heading northwest to the northern terminus of the Pacific Crest Trail. So when I was getting near the end of it, I was like dreaming of what else I'd want to do and what else was really calling to me. And so when I made that decision to go for the self-supported FKT, that, you know, launches this entire new way of looking at training and hiking and everything. So like number one, like the next few months are spent like trying to find a way to make it financially viable, because to truly like to give it your all, you do need to be ideally not working much at all short of full-time training if you can. So trying to find outdoor brands who are willing to buy into your project and buy into that mission and to have like, shared ownership of the project with you. So I was grateful to do that over the winter and early spring months. Finding Gossamer Gear, Osprey, and Virgin Outdoor were like my three primary sponsors for this project. And yeah, then the actual training itself, the physical aspect, I hiked throughout that entire winter. And then when it got to the beginning of April, April 1st, I started hiking the Arizona Trail. I think of my training in three separate sort of like chapters. The first chapter being the Arizona Trail, which I'd hiked prior. It's 800 miles. It's much different from the Appalachian Trail, obviously. It's desert. The terrain is a bit flatter. The trail is a little bit more manicured, but it's really good at building up foot strength, and like having your feet be basically made of steel is the only way you're going to survive a speed effort on the Appalachian Trail. They have to be so broken in and calloused. They can't be running into problems when you're out there because your feet are everything. So I wanted to get some like bulk general mileage on my legs and to build up my foot strength and tendon strength. I hiked it in 30 days, 800 miles, hiked it in 30 days. So then chapter two was in May. I went and hiked. It's called the New England Trail. God, how many miles? I feel like it's like 200 and something miles. It goes through Connecticut and Massachusetts. The reason I chose that trail is because it has a lot more similar terrain to what I knew I would see on the Appalachian Trail, but May is still early days for the hiking season in the Northeast where I live in New Hampshire. There's still a lot of snow around, still really wet. They're doing big, long training efforts up that far north, up in New Hampshire where I live, wasn't an option. So going to southern New England and Connecticut and Massachusetts, things were a bit more thawed out, and I was able to sort of start building up the muscle strength, starting to climb mountains day in, day out on the New England Trail. That was chapter two. And then chapter three was June and July, where I was back up in New Hampshire in my home, and I was training in the White Mountains, which that made the most sense for me because like I said, I think a lot of people would agree that New Hampshire is the hardest part of the trail. The White Mountains, the terrain, and the elevation change make it the most difficult part of the trail. So, what better way to train for a trail than by focusing all of your energy on the hardest it can throw at you? And so, yeah, like using my like home as base camp, I was able to sort of go out every day and just hike lots of mountains and turn my legs into, as strong as they could possibly be in advance of the actual effort. So
Yeah.
I did that. And then I did all the logistics aspects of it as well, which is like getting all the, gear and food and everything together. I guess we could talk about that separately.
So you've talked about your feet, ankles, knees, hips, all okay? No issues? You didn't roll your ankle or anything?
No, I didn't roll my ankle. I came in with a little bit of tendinitis in one of my legs, and I had to delay my start a little bit to get over that. But then once I got out there, I ended up sort of like, I don't know if you ever had the experience of you're sort of like balancing injuries from one leg to another. Like if your left leg is hurt, you maybe favor your right without, even if it's subconsciously. So you end up creating problems for yourself on the other leg. So I went from having that tendinitis in one leg to switching over to having a meniscus issue in the other, like in my other leg. And then, I switched back and ended up having a quad issue on the leg that I had started with the tendinitis issue on. And that was I was sort of bouncing those injuries back and forth between Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont to the point where I wasn't even sure I was going to be able to continue by the end of Vermont. I was using my trekking poles as crutches just to make it the last 10 miles to the Massachusetts border. So yeah, definitely had some injuries. I can't say it was like injury free, but I can say that once I made it through that toughest section, my body sort of like caught up and was sort of like agreeing to do what I was asking it to do, which was, something that feels superhuman, but the body can do some really amazing things, especially if you train it properly. So, the fact that it was able to heal and that I was able to, complete the trail with a strong effort like that was I'm really grateful to my body for what it did.
Oh, it's just, I think as either my physio or my personal trainer said to me, like, my body is like the queen of compensation. So at one point I had like my glutes, like actually years ago, it's all I used to talk about on the podcast, where my left glute's not firing. it's now firing. But we would try all these different maneuvers and they'd be like, do you feel that in your glute? And I'm like, nope, that's my right hip flexor. Nope, that's my arm. That like all of these things. My body was just compensating and adapting. And honest to God, it's so amazing. It's like when you first get like your hiker legs and you're just like, oh, yeah, like I can do 20 miles. Oh, this is great. Like I feel strong, I feel fit.
Yeah, it's like a hyperdrive you didn't know you had.
And it's so lovely when you get to that point when you're like you're not even thinking about it anymore. But one of the important things that hikers do think about a lot is food, is nutrition. And you know that
Mhm.
when that hiker hunger kicks in, and obviously you're really pushing your body as well. Now you've already mentioned sugar. I'm also a bit of a sugar fiend. For your food and nutrition, what was that looking like? And were you also taking any supplements to maybe offset like the sugar, like, or to try and make sure that you are getting some good stuff in your body?
Oh my. Well, I okay, well, I'll answer first, was I taking any supplements? I took a B vitamin supplement every day that I found really, really useful. That one just, like, helped with energy and, yeah, I was taking plenty of electrolytes. I had salt pills, like the sort of well-rounded electrolyte pills. So much so, I was really concerned about electrolytes just considering how hot it gets and muggy it gets on the AT, so before I started, I have some friends who run a maple farm, like a maple syrup farm, and I got a bunch of their maple syrup, and I put it in these like soft pouches, like flasks, and I opened the capsules of like electrolyte salts that I had, and I was pouring a few capsules into say like 5 or 6 ounces of maple syrup, and then carrying it with me on like during the hike, and I'd send it in my resupply boxes as well, and sort of rather than like the gels and like all the money that people like spend on these like expensive sort of like optimized science food. Mine was maple syrup and salt, and I would suck down a sip of it or a glug of it, depending on what I need before like a big climb. And yeah, that was my little like superpower boost that I would give to myself. A little bit of sugar and some salt, a lot of times is all the body needs. So I guess that's what I did for supplements. If maple syrup can be considered a supplement.
And then what were you doing? Like, were you sort of like almost a bit boring and a bit samey with the food? Like, was breakfast like oats and seeds and water, and or were you were just like snacking all the time, or were you eating like bigger meals, or what did that look like to get? Because like, I can't even imagine the calories that that you would have been burning. Like, it'd be up, especially with a pack on, like 8 to 10,000 a
Right.
day. Like, that's a hell of a lot that you need to consume, which can also be really difficult as well. Like, even trying to eat that much.
Yes, yeah. Well, so I didn't eat 8 to 10,000 calories a day on trail, even if I was burning that amount. So as far as food goes, I am not like a nutrition expert, and not only that, I also don't have very much money at all. Like I said, I'm trying to like I put all of my energy and resources into this, so that means I really don't have much money. So you can find me at the dollar store. Like the important thing for me from like a calorie standpoint, of course you do need some protein to like replace like to replenish your muscles. So eating some protein for dinner and everything is obviously super important. But like really salt, fat, carbs, that is what hikes the Appalachian Trail. That's the thing. And there's so many different ways to get it, but at the end of the day, me, I'm doing whatever snacks I can get that are shelf stable, light, and they have a good calorie and fat content to weight ratio, right? So like for every ounce you should be getting, ideally as many calories as you can, and as many grams of fat and like, heavier energy sources that you can into every ounce. So I just like think about foods like that. Like one really good sort of like protein source that I use is what we call it, well, pork rinds or chicharrones. You can find them at any dollar store. They are super cheap. And at the end, all they are is like basically like fried bacon fat. And when you render them and fry them, it actually leaves behind so much protein. If you look at like a pack of pork rinds and you look at the back of it, look and see how many grams of protein are in that tiny little bag, and then look at the weight. Because you're probably going to see like 4 ounces or less, and you're going to see like 50 to 60 grams of protein, and you're just not going to get that anywhere else for that type of price for $2, like
I was gonna say, I'm so sorry for all the vegans and vegetarians out there, but I'm literally just like licking my lips thinking, "Oh my god, that sounds amazing."
And, like, for me, that is the answer, and I think that I understand why so many people focus on nutrition and make it into this thing that if you only scientifically balance everything just right, that you'll have peak performance. I believe that that is true. I am not an expert in that, though, and I'm not gonna pretend to be. What I have found is that my goal is to get as many, like, energy, like, calories as I can into my body, and it also has to be foods that I can eat even when I am
Mm.
so sick of eating and I'm so tired. Like when have you ever been so wrung out that you just feel sick and you can't even imagine eating even though you know you need to?
Oh, I have, like, I'm literally like, I'm tunered out, I'm peanutted out, I don't wanna eat cheese, ugh, I don't wanna eat I can go through everything. Eggs, no, literally nothing. I don't want to eat anything. Snickers has always, I think, just about made it through where I'm like, "Oh, I can eat a Snickers," but
Exactly. Those are the magic foods. If you're like, of course, when I'm doing a normal hike and I'm not trying to, hike 40 to 50 miles a day, I'm eating more like regular foods that have more like real nutrition in them. But in this case, I need to just be able to get calories into my system. You're burning this bonfire of energy at all times, even when you're sleeping. So, like, it's really just about getting calories in. Like, I wasn't worried about, like, getting whole grains and stuff like that. I was worried about what calories were the closest to me when I was on trail, because I had to walk into any town, so I'm not gonna, like, walk further to get to healthier food or something. I need to get to the largest source of calories that I could get in that moment, and then I need to get back on trail and keep hiking because that's what I'm there to do.
yeah. I think I definitely went through a phase where it was actually I had to realize it's okay to eat the foods that your body is craving. If your body is craving fat, sugar, carbs, salt, etc., that's what you need to feed it. And you're burning so many calories that it's about, being kind to yourself. And
Yeah.
you mentioned this earlier, but I'd love for you to share a little bit more about it. The Divide to Crest route. So how did the idea come about and how was walking that route?
I had a bunch of there's a bunch of trails and routes that I was interested in. So I after I'd finished the Triple Crown, I'd finished, the Continental Divide Trail in 2023. I was like, "Okay, well, I've done those 3 big ones. I'd done some of the other smaller ones. I'd done the Hayduke, I'd done the Arizona Trail, and some other smaller trails as well." And I, knew that I wanted to try something new, and I wanted to push my skill set, and, one really cool way to do that is to, like, delve into route creation. It's one that people don't usually go into because it can feel maybe higher risk. But at that point, I had already had a lot of experience with navigation, like, using maps and using GPS and, reading landscapes, like especially desert landscapes. So I felt pretty confident that I could string together a way to, I had the idea that I wanted to get through Arizona, and knew I really wanted to hike across Nevada, and I knew I really wanted to go and check out the Oregon Desert, because I knew the Oregon Desert Trail was out there, which is one of the newer routes in the game. So I was like, well, I could sort of independently go after all these like little smaller goals that I want, or, like, wouldn't it be amazing if I could create one massive footpath, like, through, like, natural areas, wilderness areas that would just tie together a lot of my favorite places that I had already visited with a lot of these new places that I wanted to explore. So, like, I had really loved my time in the Grand Canyon, both on the Arizona Trail and then deeper into the backcountry hiking the Hayduke route. So I knew I wanted to get through there. I knew I wanted to go back to Zion. I knew that I really loved the New Mexico section of the CDT. I knew I wanted to check out the western fork of the Gila River. You have all these sort of like bucket list things that want to check out and that or places that were really magical and special to you. And I just started like I had I was using the Gaia app and I just started dreaming like over that winter after finishing the CDT and started connecting these massive, stretches of route. and trying to come up with ways to connect them in which you could maybe get to water sources, especially since so much of the land in between the Continental Divide and the Pacific Crest, a lot of that land is desert. So yeah, I just started sort of like trying to patchwork, put things together. I was using pre-existing routes, like reaching out to other route creators who had a lot more experience to share. Like for example, the Great Basin Trail is a incredibly long route that goes around Nevada, which is a very rarely backpacked area of the country. Most hikers would never really think of it as like a place to go. Not a lot of hiking happens there compared to some of the more well-known states like California or Washington or Colorado, places like that. But relatively not a ton of hiking. Not there is of course some, but yeah, like I reached out to that friend who was super helpful in like looking at maps and giving me suggestions for, finding water sources and towns that he recommended, things like that. So like leaning on the community of through hikers and route creators that already exist to help me inform some of like the larger scale decisions that I was making. Brett Tucker is another person who was helpful in that process and supportive. Brett Tucker and Melissa Spencer are the creators of the Mogollon Rim Trail, which goes east to west across the like northern third of Arizona. So yeah, I basically through reaching out to all of them and using my own interests and skills created this massive route, and then obviously going out and ground proofing it is a whole other thing where like you could have a conceptual route on a map, but until you've been there you don't actually know what's going on, especially out there. Like there's all these roads that might be on a map but they haven't actually existed in 50 years. They're old ranching roads that have been rerouted for various reasons, or because of pasturing changes, things like that. So like my route that I had planned in that winter, doing all that daydreaming, ended up looking much different. But a lot of like the core tenets were still there, and that's kind of the adventure for me is getting on the ground and figuring things out and finding out what works. And I don't know, I just love the whole adventure of it. So yeah, I don't know, I love that.
No, it is awesome. And so how can people find out more information about the Divide to Crest route?
I mean, you could just Google there. I think there's like a backpacker article that talks about it a good amount. I don't share the GPX tracks for various reasons, not least of all being that a lot of the GPX, since I was using other people's routes, like for Brett Tucker, he does this professionally where he's charging people to get access to some of his routes and maps and all the, like resources that he's built over the years. So it wouldn't be appropriate for me to now turn around and share his a GPX track for his route that he created. That's sort of like intellectual property that I wouldn't take away from him. But what I would say is, if you are interested in hiking the Divide to Crest route, message me on Instagram. And like literally, I will talk to you and I will get you what you need to do that and show you how to find that. But it's not going to be something that is anyone's first through hike. If you do a little bit of research on it and take a look at it, and I think most people who haven't done a pretty heavy amount of through hiking wouldn't find it appealing. It's like a pretty intense thing to do. But if you've done a lot of through hiking and you're looking to find out what the next challenge could be, the Divide to Crest Trail route might be for you. So if people reach out to me, I will hook you up, and I would love to see someone else complete it. I've had a couple people message me. I don't know of anyone who's done the full route yet, but yeah, hopefully this year. So hit me up if you want to do it.
Awesome. And Lila, how can people connect with you? Where are you most active on social media?
Instagram's really the only like the main tool that I use. My Instagram it's at Seltzer Skelter. Yeah, SELTZER SKELTER. And you can't miss me. My profile picture is a picture of me with purple hair.
I'll make sure that I include the links to your Instagram so that people can connect and follow along and especially find out more information about the Divide to Crest route. But Lila, I'd love for you to share your final words of wisdom, final words of advice for other women out there who want to take on a new challenge, who want to step outside their comfort zone. Apart from just do it, what would you like to say?
I would say hold on to the idea of scaffolding, right? Like everyone doesn't have to fully just jump and sell their car and get rid of all their things, right? Like that is not appealing or possible for the vast, vast, vast majority of people. But big adventures are within grasp for everyone. especially if you're willing to build your skill sets over time and start to slowly shape your life around the things that you truly want. So rather than one big change, what can you do this year that's going to move you towards this larger goal? So taking in bite-sized chunks is how you actually make your dreams come true.
Love that bite-sized chunks. Lyla, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast, and best of luck with all your future adventures and challenges. I can't wait to follow along.
Yeah, so nice talking to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Hey, 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 tribe. How are you all doing? Happy International Women's Day. I really hope you enjoyed this bonus episode with Lyla. The mission of the Tough Girl podcast is, I'm sure you know, because I have repeated it many, many, many times, so hopefully it rolls off your tongue as well. The mission of Tough Girl Challenges is to increase the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges. Tough Girl Challenges is for women and girls. We are inclusive. What does that mean? Girls refers to cis girls, trans girls, non-binary youth, gender non-conforming youth, gender queer youth, two-spirit youth, intersex youth, and any youth that identifies as female girl. Women refers to cis women, trans women, non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, genderqueer women, two-spirit people, intersex people, and people who identify as female women. Everything that we have talked about today will be available on the website at toughgirlchallenges.com, so please do go and check it out. Very exciting news. So if you remember many years ago now, it seems so long ago, I walked the Southwest Coast Path. So that was the summer of 2024. And I finally got round to editing those vlogs at the beginning of this year or the end of 2025. And they have been released now. So they are coming out every Friday at 7 a.m. UK time. And I actually reached out to the Southwest Coast Path Association just to let them know that I'd hiked the trail. And I was wondering if they could do any cross promotion. And they very kindly did a blog post with me, which is awesome. And they're also going to be sharing it with their listeners as well. And I think they've got about they've got about 10,000 subscribers on their email list. So I will also be sharing my little blog post where I talk a little bit more about the Southwest Coast Path. And if you haven't done so already, please do go check out the vlogs on the Tough Girl YouTube channel. We are currently at 6,030 subscribers. The goal is to get, I probably set this goal many years ago, but the goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. It is taking a lot longer than I thought it would, I'm not going to lie. I also have a bottle of champagne at home with a little tag on it which says to be drunk when I reach 10,000 subscribers. It's probably now about 3 years old, but I would like to drink this champagne eventually. But if you've got any interest in hiking the Southwest Coast Path and you just want to know more about it, then please do go and check out my vlogs. My vlogs are I think they are a very realistic representation of what you can expect when you walk trails and especially do a thru hike. So my thru hike took me 40 days. Your thru hike does not have to take you that amount of time. You can be quicker, you can be slower, you can do it in sections, you can do it at weekends, you can hike your own hike. But if you just want to see more about the countryside, more about sort of wild camping, more about resupply and what it's like walking a trail day after day, then please do go and enjoy the Southwest Coast Path vlogs. There's other vlog series on there as well, from the Appalachian Trail to the GR10 to cycling down the Pacific Coast Highway, the Overland Track, and majority of the Caminos. I think there's a couple of Caminos that I didn't end up filming. Well, I tried to film the Camino Viva del Plata and do that as YouTube shorts, and that got really challenging. I only ended up doing about 9 episodes of that one, so I'll probably have to walk that Camino again to properly film it, because if I didn't film it, it didn't happen. Thank you again for all of your incredible support. Have an amazing International Women's Day, and I'll be back with new episodes every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. If you'd like to support the Tough Girl mission to increase the amount of female role models in the media, especially in relation to adventure and physical challenges, then please visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Thank you so much. All that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all. Give it 110%. Get after it. Go for it. Believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon.